Good afternoon and good evening to all of our community members. This is the ISSA Los Angeles June 16th virtual meeting. We're glad you could join us today. ISSA-LA is the founding member of ISSA International, and our goal is to promote management practices that will ensure the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of information. I want to give a shout out to my board as we enter into a year and a half now of sequestration, which is starting to open up. So let's be hopeful of more virtual, but soon to be in-person events. Got a great board of dedicated volunteers that give a lot of time to help put on events like this, our in-person events and trainings. And we're happy that we can bring those on along to you. You can join our community if you'd like, and we encourage you to go to ISSA-LA.org. In the upper right-hand corner, you can join our mailing list, and you'll be able to receive notifications for all our events and meetings, and you can stay connected with your fellow InfoSec peers. We have educational sponsors who have given us discounts to some of their trainings and other things that they offer. I advise you to check it out, and you can get a discount. You can go to our website to get more information about that. That again is ISSA-LA.org. And get a little social with us. We love making new friends, so please connect with us on all the major platforms. We are not on Clubhouse, but we are on these more well-known social media platforms, so please connect. We've got some really good things in store for you coming up. Next month, we have a talk on how to enhance the NIST privacy framework with CMMI. You might want to learn about that if you are not aware of it. It will be affecting most of us. August 18th, we have Deviant. He's going to share his thoughts on security in our physical world. He's a performer, I should say, at DEF CON, and he does a great talk. The 31st, this is the big news, folks. We're looking for a venue, but we're planning to have an in-person meeting. It's just a happy hour. We're not having a talk on the 31st, but you might want to mark that on your calendars if you've been vaxxed, double vaxxed, or J&J, and you're feeling comfortable. We're going to find a place, and we're going to let you know, and we'd love to see your face in person again. So again, circle that on your calendar if you're comfortable with it, and it would be great. And then on September 15th, we have a very interesting guest. The first CISO for the US Navy, Chris Cleary, is going to come and talk to us. He was recently appointed as the principal cyber advisor for the Navy, the liaison with the rest of the government and a key security lead. And so that should be interesting to get the government's perspective on where we are. We'll see what he's got up his sleeve. I'm waiting for the abstract, but he's a great speaker. I've seen him speak before, so that should be fun. If you want today to ask questions of our speaker, you can use an app we use most meetings called Slido. If you go to app.sli.do, and then it just asks for a code, so it syncs it with our particular meeting. Just put in ISSA-LA, and then you can ask either anonymously or you can enter your name. Either one's fine with us, and you can ask questions, and our speaker Baljit will be checking those, and he can answer them during the presentation or afterwards. But please do, I encourage you to ask questions, because the more interaction we have, the better the presentation for everybody. And as a speaker, we love that. So please ask away. And now, without further ado, we're going to learn about key API governance considerations for digitation and monetization from Dr. Baljit Malhotra. Baljit, welcome.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you to ISSA-LA chapter, the board, and the colleagues who are organizing this event. Really glad to be part of this community. Thanks to Tanveer as well, who has coordinated with you to organize this event. If you please allow me to share my slides. Okay, I can do that now. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So just a quick introduction about myself. As Richard mentioned, I'm Baljeet. I'm the founder and CEO of Teej Lab. Before I founded Teej Lab, I was VP of research at Black Duck Software. I created their R&D division. It was a quite successful exit for me, which led to the creation of Teej Lab. Before that, I was with the SAP as a research director, looking into various aspects of open source risk management across various products and services. Before that, I was in academia, did my PhD at Alberta, and did my postdoc at National University of Singapore. And since academic stint, I've been with the enterprise world for the last 10 years or so. So today's topic is very near and dear to me because this is a topic that I've been looking into, not only from a research perspective, but also from an industry leadership perspective, where we have brought in some of the important solutions for the colleagues. This is the overall agenda of this talk. I was checking with the colleagues how we can adjust and make this presentation a bit more interactive. So I really encourage participation. Looks like there is a great platform for posing questions. I'll be taking pauses to check those questions. So feel free to ask those questions as I make presentation. Just as an overview agenda for this workshop, I will be talking about API governance. Now, there is no single definition to API governance. Every enterprise has its own view and processes and people and personnel in place to manage APIs. But I'll share some of my thoughts and experiences and then slowly get into API risks. And in order to be uh, in a good state from a security and compliance posture point of view, either you are managing your cloud, you're managing enterprise applications, APIs are pervasive and everywhere. So you need to have a really good API management program. As described in the summary, I'll talk about what it takes to build an API management program, which is part of your API governance. And ownership, continuous monitoring are some of the things that I will touch upon. If time permits, I will also give some hands-on scenarios. In particular, I will use a community version of the platform that we have, which we use with the various community members to demonstrate proof of concepts and things like which really makes clear what the governance issues, what the risk management issues we are talking about in this presentation. Now, without any giving a specific definition to API, this picture essentially captures the digital world we are living into. You may have your own understanding of APIs, but this picture is all about how APIs are connecting different digital systems around the globe. Either connecting your enterprise services or your social media channels, or even online markets, or your systems that are connecting to these markets, either eBay or SAP or MuleSoft or other solutions that are there. In all these different systems that are being connected, APIs play an important role. And in many ways, APIs have become the lifeline of this connected digital world. Now, to give you a global perspective of this API ecosystem, let me share some numbers with you. I hope these numbers will inspire you to look into this space more closely, because this is a space that is evolving much faster than you can imagine. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but 83% of the internet traffic as we speak today is through APIs. Now, this is a very, very important development, because majority of the other connections or traffic that is happening is through other, perhaps through different other websites or different other services. But all these APIs contribute to 83% of the traffic on the internet as we speak. We did our own research, and in this research, we wanted to estimate roughly how many APIs exist. And by the way, just for the sake of clarity, I am talking about the APIs that are available through the web. I'm not talking about the APIs that are locally connecting your laptop, or APIs have been existing since 70s, but we are talking about APIs that are available through the internet over the web. Now, these APIs could be, private behind your firewall, but these are the APIs I'm talking about, which are available through the internet over the web. We estimate that there are roughly 1 million APIs that exist. This number could be growing by leaps and bounds, especially with the growth of IoT. A lot of companies have become SaaS companies. Data is moving into the cloud. Your software is moving into the cloud, and many services are becoming accessible through these APIs. Low code, no code, GUI-less interfaces. These are all basically talking about connectedness through the APIs. Now, that was a global overview. Now, let me share some thoughts from an enterprise API ecosystem perspective. In any given enterprise, you may have APIs that you're using from external parties. The examples I can give you is, Salesforce API or a LinkedIn API, which is connecting your social feeds and whatnot. But these are essentially APIs that you do not necessarily build, but you consume from your external partners and customers. But you still need a way to manage them. You need a way to control them. You need to manage the licenses or other aspects of governance. The other category of APIs could be the APIs that your team built. But that does not necessarily mean that these are the APIs that are just internally being used. These could be the APIs that you build, but these are being consumed externally as well, but in a limited way by your customers and partners. These could be APIs that connect your internal systems, breaking data silos, or various purposes. There is a third category, which is very interesting, and perhaps from a security and compliance posture perspective, very important for any enterprise. Now, what is this category? These categories of APIs are those APIs which you do not necessarily know, but still they are part of your ecosystem. Now, you must be wondering where these APIs come from. How come I don't know about these APIs? So there are a number of reasons. I can give you a couple of examples. There is a lot of open source usage. We estimate that 80 to 90% of the applications, including enterprise applications, are built using open source. I can give you various examples, but Linux itself is a very prominent example that runs basically the entire web, which is open source. This way, many enterprise applications are built using open source. So a developer may download a library from GitHub for a particular technical functionality or business functionality, not necessarily knowing there could be certain API integrations that might get into the system. Similarly, companies buy companies. Merger and acquisitions happens all the time. So you may acquire an assets, and these assets get integrated with your products and services, but you may not necessarily know APIs that you have acquired when you bought these digital assets. So these are two categories or channels rather from which these unknown APIs may get into your system. Of course, there are third-party integrations, there are libraries, there are white solutions that you may adopt. So there are a number of reasons why you may not necessarily know all the APIs within your API ecosystem. Now, governance, as I mentioned, there is no single definition of API governance. Every enterprise has its own priorities, they have their own budgets, they have their own processes, they have their own tools in place to govern their APIs. But this is really important that when you look the holistic picture around your API ecosystem, then you can imagine, these 5 buckets become very important for your API governance. Let me go through them one by one. And by the way, that is where the title of this presentation is, regardless of what those objectives or the definitions you might put in place for API governance. But essentially, you may have two goals at a very high level. Either you are digitizing your assets, or you want to monetize your assets, or even directly monetizing your APIs, because a lot of companies are building APIs, not just necessarily for integration purposes, but also there is a monetization strategy. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in the later part of the presentation. But let me go through this key considerations. Now, when you have these gamuts of APIs, internal APIs, external APIs, APIs you did not build, maybe APIs you built, but they are being consumed by external customers and partners, and also some of the APIs you might learn through discovery processes that I talked about. Now, you need a way to centrally orchestrate them, regardless of which these APIs are, where they come from. Typically, CIO's office or CISOs, they want to see a central way to orchestrate these APIs, because that's where they can generate analytics, which allows them to govern APIs across their enterprise, regardless of the business units. So in this context, discovering and benchmarking those APIs become very, very important. And least thing you want happening within your organization is, if these unknown APIs are there, they may pose certain risks to you. Even if these are your internal APIs, you cannot take things for granted, because APIs may evolve, your data sources may evolve, new laws may come, your partners may impose certain restrictions on you. So these APIs may constantly evolve, your policies may change. So because of those reasons, your risk is always evolving, and you need different ways to manage those risks. And of course, investment always comes on top of leadership's mind, because you may buy certain tools for specific reasons to solve specific problems, but then you may have certain processes that support those tools. So you may have a lot of investment across your processes, personal training, and the tools that you have purchased. So as these APIs are evolving, how do you ensure that your investments are well protected and it evolves along with your API system that is evolving? At the last, but not the least, certainly you want to have a holistic lifecycle management plan in place, because as I mentioned, you may add APIs, you may remove APIs, you can bring a new partner, you can bring a new vendor, you may have new integrations opportunities, or your customers may force you to build certain APIs because they simply want to bypass some of the UIs because they have a better workflow. So in this case, you want to have a full-blown API management program that manages the lifecycle of these APIs. Now, before I go into some of the other aspects of the API governance, I've highlighted this API governance legal risk management will remain the central piece of this presentation. ISSA is all about security, or various aspects of security. You cannot be secure without securing your API. So this is the message I want to give. And because of that reason, we look into API risks in more detail, and how do we manage those risks as part of the API lifecycle management. But before I go into different API risks and some examples I share, let me do a quick check on the Q&A platform, where, as Richard advised, there might be some questions that might pop up. I'm also going to take a quick look in the chat window as well, if somebody has. Okay, so I just want to quickly do a quick check on the chat window as well. Let's see if there are any questions.
No questions there, Baljeet. Nothing yet.
Oh, great. Thank you, Tanveer. If you can please keep an eye, and feel free to stop me if you see any question.
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay, great. So let me share some examples. APIs, in many ways, are entry door to your information systems. And these API ecosystems are evolving. And I have seen firsthand several cases in which there are API integrations in the order of 5,000 or so into one single product. Forget about the entire enterprise. So very easily, these ecosystem of APIs could evolve into hundreds and thousands. You cannot afford to not know all your APIs. Regardless of internal, external, third-party APIs, where they come from, you must keep a handle on your API ecosystem. And typically, the software security has evolved into API security as well, because if 83% of the internet traffic is through APIs, you can imagine theory, the attack surface is also 83%. As a matter of fact, Gartner has recently predicted that 90% and above the attacks on web applications would actually come through APIs. So you can imagine the immense importance of these APIs and protecting the security posture of those APIs. I've listed some of the problems that could occur, which could lead to some of the problems that I'll describe in more detail, but I think you get the point. These are some of the real world examples that have taken place just this year itself. Of course, the top two are from this year, some of them are from the previous year, but big companies, big organizations are affected by these API breaches. The impact and the quantification of the damage that these APIs can cause to your organization, it varies depending on the nature of these APIs. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say if this is a social media API like Facebook or your Twitter API, the damage could be very much in terms of breaching the privacy of individuals, or even bringing a social media platform down by service of denial attack, but because simply somebody was able to call these APIs multiple times and able to bring it down, or various other ways of attack. Now, the impact there could not be directly related to business loss, but again, it's a loss of reputation. And eventually, in the case of, let's say, Twitter API, every tweet, in somehow you can quantify there is a dollar value, right? Similarly, if it's a telecom industry, if your billing information is stolen, you can imagine the impact. If it is a social media application, or if it's a COVID tracing application, then you can see the impact on the integrity of these systems and the trust that these breaches break among your customers and partners, and the tangible and intangible losses they may cause to you. And more importantly, if these leads to situations where these becomes legal issues like lawsuits and things like that, every breach, the tendency is to quantify to the dollar value. So these breaches could not eventually just stay to loss of reputation or loss of data, but also loss of business continuity, and also the dollar value as well. So how do we identify this risk? Even before that, what risk we are talking about? Is there a way for us to classify these risks so that, within in our enterprise, we can see what kind of risks from these APIs are more prone to happen to our organization? As I mentioned, depending on your line of business, depending on the nature of APIs that you're exposing to external, internal, or other stakeholders, identifying these risks becomes an important part of API governance. We believe, we can classify these API risks into 5 main buckets. Security risk, legal risk, financial risk, operational risk, and regulatory risk. Now, there is some overlap between all these types of API risk, but you can see, if there is a security risk we are talking about, eventually there could be a operational risk as well. If you're talking about legal risk, there is a financial loss as well. So hence there is a financial risk as well. But you get the point. Now let me go through these details and explain each one of those at a very high level. But again, if there is a need, we will go into more detail as well. Now, if you remember the slides I talked about where I represented how the enterprise API ecosystem may look like, known APIs, unknown APIs, free APIs, paid APIs, partner APIs, and also the unknown APIs that you did not know. So if you do not even know these unknown APIs, then how do you manage security? How do you manage compliance, right? And in many cases, you can say that, oh, these are free APIs. We got it from a website or from a vendor, a Joe developer, which was a very cool API we integrated, whatnot. But again, there could be a lot of issues that may come because of this, right? So first of all, you want to know all your APIs. Even if these are known APIs, even these are internal APIs, you cannot just take things for granted. You must treat them as a product and basically manage, their versions. You want to see who's the owner of these APIs, somebody who's managing the version of these APIs. There is a policy when we are sunsetting these APIs, and also putting access controls around this. And I'm not just talking about authorization, authentication, but we are also talking about the ownership and from a licensing point of view, but also who are your users. And there is no one single type of user. There could be paid users, free users. There could be organizations that are accessing, which are partners. There could be organizations that are customers and whatnot. So it's a whole gamut of things we are talking about here. So let me touch upon some of the legal and regulatory risks. From an unknown API perspective, these APIs, if you did not know, let's say if you discover after the fact that you are suddenly exposed to an API, which was consumed by one of your products or a mobile app or whatnot, there could be any number of scenarios. And suddenly you realize that this was an API that was basically providing some sensitive information, and there was less due diligence at your end, where you were basically consuming this API and perhaps storing people's name and personal information and whatnot. So from a legal point of view, from a regulatory point of view, what could be the impact on that? Furthermore, maybe you were using this API, you did not know. Maybe you knew that this API is by a good vendor, but suddenly you realize that when we signed on to this API, you send a piece of information that the vendor was storing outside the country where you had some legal obligations. APIs are hosted services. A vendor could be based in the US, maybe based in Canada, maybe based in Europe, but maybe they are hosting their services in regions to which you are not familiar with. And as part of your regulatory requirement, you do not want that data to be stored outside these regions, or number of reasons, right? So if you did not even know these APIs, let alone where these data are being stored and whatnot, you are exposing yourself to various legal risks. And once again, even if you knew these APIs, there could be other scenarios. For instance, you were using a API by a well-known vendor, but that well-known vendor, you may have a commercial agreement in place, but this vendor changed its terms of services at some point in time simply because their policies changed, or in order for them to be compliant with certain laws of the land, they changed their terms of services, which had impact on you, because suddenly they say, okay, you are using this API. That API gives this certain piece of data. You cannot use that certain piece of data in this certain way, or whatever the situation might be. So how do you constantly track those issues? So changing terms of services or technical changes in those API responses can expose you to certain legal and regulatory risks. This is something which is not very difficult to understand. Everything is some way you can quantify to a dollar value. Some are difficult, some are not, some are straightforward. Regardless of that, financial risk is the most important risk that you want to know, if possible, immediately. For example, the scenario here is, let's say you bought a company, you acquired a company, and the mandate was get this product into our system as soon as possible. Now, you did not realize that in the process of integrating this product, there were certain APIs from certain vendors, and these were APIs because before the acquisition, they were making 100,000 calls per year, and they were under a rate limit that you were not, before acquisition, they were not violating. Now, suddenly, this solution became part of a larger ecosystem after you bought it, and this needs to scale. I mean, one reason you bought it because you want to create new products and services. You want your services to scale to a larger ecosystem. Now, suddenly these API calls need to scale to 1 million calls per year or something like that, right? Now, you did not realize that we don't have a commercial agreement in place. These vendors, they suddenly send you a bill of, thousands of dollars, and suddenly you are exposed to certain financial risks that you did not realize earlier. So many of these things could be hypothetical, but I've seen some cases in which these things have happened because of either the vendors were not known in advance, and suddenly these APIs needed to scale to a larger ecosystem, which caused certain problems or frictions. And also from a business continuity point of view, which again has a financial impact on you. If these APIs were even known to you, but certain technical changes into those APIs, or maybe suddenly these APIs slow down because you were not tracking their constantly how they're performing, and suddenly these APIs are responding from a millisecond to seconds and to minutes. Now, suddenly your application has slowed down, or even worse, they have killed one aspect of your application. Maybe that feature or function was very important to your customers and partners, and suddenly, you have a churn rate which is exceeding your expectation, and maybe at the bottom of the problem is this API that is not scaling, that is not performing well, leading to financial losses. So once again,
we do have a question. Can I go ahead and pop it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, what are the risks of DevOps and broken authorization in your view? Did you copy that?
Yeah. So if your authorization itself is broken, which means anybody or somebody who has the knowledge about your API endpoints, they can get access to the resources that these APIs are exposing. Right. So oftentimes you may have problem with your business logic as well. Let's say even you bypass this authorization. When you're authenticating to certain resources, this could lead to, let me give you a simple example. At the end of the day, every API actually gives you access to certain data. If you go even deeper to that, API, when you invoke that API, it is running a query against your database, or it is fetching some data. If your authentication authorization mechanisms are broken, either you're exposing too much data or you're exposing everything, right? So absolutely, authentication authorizations could lead to exposing your data in a way that you did not expect, hence leading to financial risks, operational risks, and other aspects of the risk I talked about. Hopefully that answered the question, but I'm happy to give a quick pause to see if there is any additional question. Tanvir, is there any other question?
No, you can continue, Baljeet.
Okay, so once again, a quick check on the Q&A platform. So no question there either. Okay, so I switch back to the presentation again. Now, I think when I was explaining financial, I end up explaining some of the operational aspect as well, because many of these risks are tied to each other. They are not independent of each other. There could be an API breach, which immediately has exposed the data, and suddenly your hackers have access to credit card information or your emails of your customers and partners, and eventually you figure out there are transactions that are happening, or worse, your customers come after you for certain financial losses, so there is a legal risk. It could lead to certain problems. Now let's get into certain aspects of API governance from an enterprise perspective, how we can manage those. So I talked about growing API ecosystem at the global level, how enterprises are untouchable, their ecosystem is growing. Then I talked about several risks that happens because of that growing ecosystem. And now let me explain some of the solutions that you may want to put in place to manage those risks. just a refresher, this is the ecosystem of APIs that we are talking about. And if you're paying attention, I moved the unknown APIs first rather than internal and external APIs. And this is a no fluke. This is by design. Why? Because it's as simple as it is to see that if you do not even know your APIs, how can you manage all those risks that I talked about? And hence the order of these unknown APIs. So the first thing you want to know is, what are those APIs that I did not know? And you want to put certain tools and processes in place to discover those unknown APIs. Right, so we will not go into detail of how to find if there is a time. I will try to give certain examples from that perspective and show you how to conduct such a due diligence by which you can find your unknown APIs. If you find those APIs, just knowing APIs is not good enough. You want to know the vendor. You want to see what is the input to that API, what data comes out. If this is your API that you did not know, you were exposing into certain applications, then again, the same due diligence process you want to conduct. And of course, not only just unknown APIs, if you have already tools and processes in place, perhaps you're already doing security benchmarking, you're already looking into some of the legal aspects and security aspects. Some of the key attributes, without giving a set definition, what are the key attributes of any API governance program? I've already talked about enough the visibility. So from unknown API perspective, I hope by this time I've already convinced you there is no work around that. You must know all your APIs to the best of your ability. You put tools in place, you put processes in place to bring that visibility. Even if you had a process in place to check out your APIs, you are somehow have a way to track your internal, external APIs that you already knew. But giving a seamless access to different stakeholders to these APIs is very, very important. That's part of the visibility. So typically enterprises achieve this goal by building marketplaces or putting API gateways in front of their systems and the internet, where they can bring this visibility for their usage, consumption, but also if they have tons of different APIs, they want to make it easy for their internal and external customers so that these APIs can be consumed in a seamless fashion. Cost is very, very important. Especially when it comes to using APIs that are third parties, especially if these are not free APIs. If these are APIs for which you are expecting some bills, you want to manage that cost. Compliance is again very important because here we are not just talking about regulatory compliance, but you may have certain aspects of certain obligations. These could be quality obligations. Once again, if I get some time, I will give you some practical examples and show some quality aspects where you want to meet, where the compliance is no longer about compliance to legal terms. Compliance is no longer about just compliant to GDPR or certain laws of the land. Compliance could be your internal processes and certain quality standards that you have put in place to which you want to be compliant to, right? So this is very important aspect. It's much broader than you can imagine. Trust is, again, and like any other system in the world, is very important, and you want to put the tools and processes for one reason. If you are building these APIs upon which your customers and partners depend upon, trust is important. And likewise, if you're consuming APIs that are built by third parties or customers and partners, they need to assure certain things so that you can trust on those third party services, right? So trust is very, very important. So how do you put different mechanisms in place to govern your APIs? Now I'm just taking a quick look at the time, and I think we are good on time. So I might be able to squeeze in a quick a practical scenario where I will be able to show some examples where I will walk you through these different risks that we're talking about. Now let me spend maybe 2 to 3 minutes on this slide. how do you put control? So we talked about what is the overall objective of your API governance program. Now this is how do you actually implement it? What are the nuts and bolts you need to implement your API governance program? So first of all, you need mechanisms to access these different partners, organizations, and access is a two-way I'm talking about. Not only you enable access to your APIs to your customers and partners, but also when you are consuming APIs, are you providing a seamless access of your APIs that you consume from third parties across your different business units, right? For example, there could be an API that needs to be consumed in 10 different products. How do you enable that access? If you have 10 different business units who need to consume this API, do they have separate legal agreements with the same vendor? Are they dealing with that vendor separately, or you have some way to orchestrate this access control? So from an audit perspective, you want to create certain trails because, when your APIs are being consumed, when your APIs are consumed by your partners, you want to audit them as a producer, as a consumer. So creating a audit trail is very, very important. In some cases, caching mechanisms provided by these gateways provide you some of those capabilities, but I think it is much more than that. For example, simple problem about tracking terms of services, right? So how do you ensure you are being compliant to all those terms of services that are evolving? I mean, I can imagine if you have one API, two APIs, maybe 10 APIs, you can manage this manually. But if you have hundreds and thousands of APIs from hundreds of thousands of different vendors who can change these terms of services, it's not difficult. It's not very easy for you to manage that. Once again, control and access, somehow they are overlapping. But here, you want to put certain controls when and if you create these audit trails and you find certain issues, how do you put certain controls so that does not happen as these technical or legal changes are happening into your API ecosystem? So how do you control those? More importantly, if you are provisioning your APIs, what is your deployment strategy? From both perspectives, either you're consuming those APIs or you're exposing these APIs. What is your deployment strategy? There could be different deployments that might be happening across different geographies, different products, different business units. So there is always going to be a trade-off between availability, cost, and scalability. So I think deployment is very, very important, where you want to look into different aspects. How do you control when these services are being deployed? And to support all these different tools. Now, I'm not talking about one tool which is supporting either access, audit, or control, or deployment. You need analytics everywhere. And more importantly, for the leadership level, you want to provide certain analytics that gives them a high-level overview of their entire API ecosystem. We may not have time to go into the detail, but I think you get the point. The analytics a developer needs to do the routinely security check or the legal checks, those analytics are different than the analytics a CISO needs. Maybe a CISO needs, what he needs is, or she needs is, show me all the vendors from which we are consuming these APIs at the global level. I just want to know where they are. So, having that bird's eye view immediately answers a lot of your business questions. So I did promise to give you a quick snapshot of some of the practical examples. But before I go to that, I will come to the summary slide later, but I will go to give all these different scenarios I talked about. But before I go to that scenario, let me see if you guys have any questions at this stage. Tanveer, can I request you again? Can you please check if there is any question?
Yeah, there is a question on Slido. So basically the question is, how do you find the unknown or hidden APIs, right? And I think there's a follow-up to. Are you able to see the Slido, Baljeet?
Yes, I can actually see that. But please continue.
Yeah, so the first part of the question is how do you find the unknown APIs, and then how do you find those interesting interactions?
Yeah, great question. So I think the scenario that I will show is maybe we'll start from there, finding unknown APIs. And I think Gene has posed another question is, that is, how do you find these interesting interactions? Okay, I'm not sure what's the meaning of this question, but let me answer this, the earlier question that was posed, which is about unknown APIs. So I'm logging into our community version of the system that we have built, and I will try to give as many scenarios as possible while respecting the time limit. It does not matter what tool or process or system is in place. I'm sure you are familiar with API marketplaces. You may have already seen API portals and whatnot. But just while staying, not getting into the details of any particular tool or particular way of exploring, let me just touch upon all those different problems I talked about. An important aspect of your discovery where you did not know about the API is your ability to find those APIs from marketplaces in a seamless fashion. And one way to achieve that objective is index your APIs and organize your APIs in a nicer way. For example, if you have 10 different business units, you may want to have 10 different categories of APIs from these business units. Maybe you can organize them. Here, I'm not necessarily showing you that scenario, but the scenario I'm showing you here is, let's say as a consumer, we are big on the API consumption. So I'm organizing my APIs by different businesses or different industries, and I can see in each of these different businesses what are the different APIs that we are consuming. Furthermore, I should be able to see, if I want to see the detail about this API, I should be able to see who my vendor is, what this API is, where exactly this vendor will be hosting this API, what are some of the examples if I'm able to explore. All these things are very important for me, even before I start to integrate this API that helps me make more informed decision. So you do not start that, okay, here is the API, here is the product, it's being used. Maybe it's already too late, right? So you want to start from get-go where you can do this kind of discovery about the APIs that you did not know. I will also talk about the APIs you had no idea to search about, that you could even search from marketplaces like that as well. So here I'm showing you what are the different recorded tags, what are the different examples and whatnot. Of course, some of the marketplaces also support search capabilities. For example, if I want to see, let's say the scenario I want to give you is, we are a company, we are a digital media company, and we have an application that we are building for our customer, which does a social or sentiment analysis. So you can imagine in any sentiment analysis, what is the importance of social feeds? These feeds may come from Twitter, these feeds may come from Facebook. So one important investigation I wanted to do here is, what does Twitter API bring? And if I want to go deeper inside this and I want to explore what this API does, I should have the capability to run this API very quickly without getting into details of how to invoke this API and see what this API does. So here, let's say I want to make a call to this API to see what this API does. So let's say the example I want to use is ISSA-LA. And let's see, I hope you guys understand that what this API does. Twitter, everybody knows it's a platform where people tweet and talk about different products, different events, or whatever they're tweeting. What this API does is it gives you the opportunity to explore what are the latest tweets that are happening on the Twitter. So this API basically provides that service, which is built by Twitter. So by posing a query against this API, I will be able to collect the latest tweets and do my due diligence that I will show in a minute. So here I'm showing you a quick way where I am able to invoke this API, and not just only invoke this API, but I'm able to see quickly what this API does in terms of accessing and providing the data to me. So in a minute, if I can. if I can give it a minute. So I should be able to see what was the input to the data, just like the example I showed earlier. It should be able to tell me what is the input to this API, and does it contain any personal information and whatnot. You should be able to see what are the terms of services of this API that Twitter is providing. So here, I'm quickly able to get down to the terms of services of the Twitter API. You may have certain other analysis tool in place where you might be able to see what are the terms of services. You may analyze it. The difficulty could be these terms of services could change. For example, in this case, the last it was changed was in June. But the point I'm trying to make here is this could change at any point in time. Some of the other things I could look into from a governance perspective is where exactly this API call will be hosted. As you can see here, at least when I made this call, my call is being responded by a specific server, which was hosted in the US. So not necessarily a bad situation for me. So for some reason, I am getting a error here, but let me see if I can use another example. Okay, my apologies for the technical hiccup. So you can see that I made a quick Twitter call, and the question I asked through this Twitter API was, okay, show me all the latest tweets that are happening on the Twitter platform, which contains ISSA-LA. This was my query. So you can see that very quickly, I can see if the tweets are happening. More importantly, from a legal risk management perspective, let's say if I was required to do the due diligence, if this contains any personal information. So with a very quick PI analysis, I'm able to see whether this will contain any personal information. And once again, the scenario I'm trying to show here is this is not necessarily a security breach. All I'm trying to tell here is if you have an application that is intended to use this API, you may want to find out, is there a policy to see whether you want to store these people's name? Or your policy is, we do not want to store people's name because we want to just digest these feeds that are coming in, but do not attribute the names to those tweets and do our sentiment analysis. I was able to show you a quick PI analysis I did. Again, further from a developer point of view, I want to see what those tags are, where exactly those tags are embedded. So this due diligence, upfront due diligence, helps you to make those informed decisions, which makes the usage of this API more secure and more compliant. And once again, I talked about the terms of services anyway. So some of the other aspects from a security point of view you want to look into this is, especially from your own API perspective. Now, there is no one process in place in any given organization, but one of the best practices you can put in place within your organization is use some industry best practices. For example, OWASP is a standard, which is a community driven. You want to benchmark your internal APIs against those industry standards. Similarly, you may have a PCI process in place. You may have a CIS. So you want to use some of those standards to benchmark your APIs to see if your APIs are suffering from these problems. And more importantly, and of course, you can not every kind of test case is applicable to all kinds of APIs, but that's the goal. So you can choose these different APIs that are part of your ecosystem and basically run those test cases. To show you some scenario from that perspective, let me just switch to another account where I can show you some more practical use cases. So this is the account where I've already generated some reports, which may look something like this once you run those test cases. And once again, this is not about just one-time due diligence. You may want to perform these due diligence on constant basis. Again, as I talked about, from a lifecycle management perspective. But before I go ahead, let me quickly check with Richard. Richard, how we are doing on time? Are we good with time, or we still have few minutes?
Continue. We feel that this is very worthy of people's attention. If they have to drop, we understand. It's going to be on YouTube. They can always pick up if they want to come back later. So keep on going, Baljit.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. So once again, when you put those tools in place, it doesn't matter this tool or a tool from a vendor A or B, C, the best practices you want to put in place is you want to run these benchmark security test cases against those tools on constant basis. And a report which may look something like this, where you can see a particular API, or you can generate a report card of API. Just like you may have a student who fails certain test cases, similar, you can treat your assets where you have certain test cases that this particular API has passed, this API has failed. Obviously, on this particular API, in this particular report card, I did not run all the scenarios, but you get the point. So here I'm showing you that this particular API passed the SQL injection test cases. The last time I ran was this time, and this guy failed the test, buffer overflow, and this is the last time when I ran. And of course, one important aspect of API governance is not just this kind of intelligence, but automation as well. The reason is, you do not want developers to slow down when it comes to using these best practices and tools in place. I mean, they would hate if these tools slow them down. So what is the solution here? You want not only just intelligence, but also the automation where all these reports can be seamlessly integrated with your DevSecOps operations. For example, you want this report to be only go to the developer or to the team who's managing these APIs if there is a problem. If there are certain thresholds that are breached by this API, maybe there are certain policies that you put in place that if it breaches this SQL injection, this is or if it breaks SQL injection, this is very important. We want to look into that immediately. I can go into some other examples. Now, one of the colleagues from the audience asked a very important question about the unknown APIs. Now, if you paid attention, all the scenarios I depicted so far, searching an API, calling a Twitter API, I had some understanding about what API I want to search, what are the security test cases I want to perform against those APIs. Now, the last scenario I want to conclude with is, what if you did not know those APIs, okay? And where these APIs come from. So let me show you that scenario. If you go back to my initial slide that I was presenting, which was here, few slides back about unknown APIs, let me refresh your thoughts again. These APIs may come from different libraries that developers may download from GitHub, or these libraries may get integrated with your systems because simply you bought a company through M&A transactions, they get integrated. Now, what you want to do is, one important aspect of your due diligence is to check your inventories as the software applications are evolving. So in this simple demonstration, I'm going to show you is a bunch of libraries. Now, this could be your enterprise application. This could be your third-party library. Doesn't really matter. Tools should be able to scan those inventories and tell you if you're using this particular library that I downloaded from GitHub. For example, in this case, I'm showing you some metadata that one of my colleagues downloaded this from GitHub. He's probably intending to use it, but let me show you if he ends up using this. He may be using this for a particular HTTP call that he's integrating, but not necessarily knowing this OK HTTP library has Facebook integration, right? Has GitHub integrations. Where exactly those are, you can see those. The tool should be able to support you that Facebook integration is in this particular file, in this particular location, and you can figure out, okay, oh, I did not know this particular API is going to be invoked through this library. And even though if you're not using this library, part of the due diligence process is you want to ask with the development team or the engineering team, are we using this API? Okay. More importantly, as I showed to you already, not only you confirm this API is being used, but you want to know what this API does. Just like the Twitter example I gave, you can invoke this API. I'm not going to do that, but I think you get the point. You want to do a live test on this API, see what this API would do if you invoke this API in real time. So I think we are pretty much near to what we wanted to talk about in terms of some practical scenarios. So what I'm going to do is go back to the slide mode that I had previously, and let me sum up what we talked about today. So today I shared with you API ecosystems are evolving at the global scale. API ecosystems are evolving within enterprises. Whether you know this or you don't know this, but they're constantly evolving. You as an enterprise are not secure if your APIs are not secure. Why? Because majority of transactions, digital transformations are happening this through APIs, which is evidently from the fact that companies like Akamai have estimated 83% of the traffic is coming through APIs, which means theoretically, that's what you have in your enterprise as well. And this ecosystem will continue to grow. So API governance is very, very important from a risk management perspective for your organization. I also talk about how to conduct a simple due diligence when you are either building APIs or consuming APIs, if you are internal APIs, if these are external APIs being consumed from third parties. You want to put a design in place starting from get-go when you consume those APIs. You want to enforce policies, security policies, best practices, which allow you to consume and build these APIs in a secure and compliant way. You want to put access control mechanisms. You want to have an audit trail. You want to put certain controls and deployment strategies in place where you can collect analytics to govern your APIs in a holistic way. I also gave you some examples, some real-time examples, as I showed in the demonstration, which I hope inspires you to look into this area in a more deeper fashion. This is my contact information. I encourage you to reach out to our ISSA colleagues and ask them if you have more questions. If you think there are a few minutes, I can stay longer. If I can answer those questions, happy to do that. But with that note, Richard, back to you. And once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this audience. Really enjoyed this presentation, and back to you for concluding remarks.
Well, thank you, Baljeet. That was incredibly informative. I think that API has gotten a lot of discussion. I've seen this in the past year or two. It's becoming more on the radar for everybody. So this was a good, timely talk. Thank you so much for that. Josh, do we have any questions that the audience would love to have answered? Great presentation. Okay, I think you answered you answered the questions along the way. So it looks like you're home free, my friend. Thank you so much for speaking. A reminder to all of you who are watching this, August 31st, we're hoping to have a live happy hour. We're looking for a venue. If any of you know a restaurant with nice outdoor space that would maximize our safety, then please let us know. Reach out to any of the board members or just go to the ISSA-LA site. I'm going to be looking around as well, and it would be great to shake your hands with gloves or elbow bumps or whatever you guys want to do. We're still not at hugs yet, but we're hoping for that soon. So with that said, everyone stay safe. We're looking forward to it. Baljeet, safe travels wherever you're headed next. And everybody, watch the Stanley Cup Finals. Take care now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard, Mark, and Josh. It was great, participating, and yeah, hopefully we'll love to come back in the future for a more, for a hands-on workshop, or if on another topic. Do keep us in mind, and we'd love to come back in the future.
No, good. We can have that meeting with single malts. Excellent. Okay.
And thanks again for hosting us. Appreciate it, and stay safe. I'll try to swing by August 31st. If I'm in LA, I'll come and hang out with all of you.
Okay, great. So long, everybody.
Thank you, great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.